General Motors just wrote off $7.6 billion on electric vehicles in a single year. Their net income got slashed in half. They posted their first quarterly loss since the bankruptcy. And when GM CEO Mary Barra was asked at a press conference in Detroit, she said she has no regrets. After nearly $8 billion went up in smoke, her answer is to double down and build even more EVs. Every other automaker on the planet is running for the exits right now, but not Barra. And if you think that sounds insane, wait until you see the numbers behind the decisions she has already made. Subscribe if you want to know which automaker falls apart next, because GM is just the beginning. To understand how GM ended up here, you have to go back to 2020. That is when Mary Barra stood in front of investors and unveiled what she called the most important announcement in the history of General Motors: an all-electric future. 30 new EVs globally by 2025, a commitment of $35 billion to electrification through 2025, and the big one, 1 million North American EV production capacity by the end of 2025. Those were not vague promises from a press release. Those were targets Barra personally staked her reputation on. She told everyone who would listen that GM was going to beat Tesla at its own game. The Ultium battery platform was supposed to be the weapon that made it happen, a modular system flexible enough to power everything from a compact crossover to a full-size pickup. GM even launched a joint venture with LG Energy Solution called Ultium Cells, originally planning 3 massive battery plants in Ohio, Tennessee, and Michigan at a combined cost of over $7 billion. The Warren, Ohio plant opened in late 2022. The Spring Hill, Tennessee plant started production in early 2024. The third plant in Lansing, Michigan was supposed to cost $2.6 billion and push total capacity past 130 gigawatt hours. Instead, GM sold its entire stake in that Lansing plant to LG Energy Solution in December 2024 for roughly $1 billion, just to get their money back. LG completed the takeover and is now going to supply batteries to Toyota from a factory that was supposed to power GM's electric future. That is like building a restaurant, selling the kitchen to your competitor, and then telling your customers the menu has not changed. Honestly, I think Barra believed her own hype. And that is always where the trouble starts, because here is what was actually happening behind the curtain while Barra was making those promises. GM's EV division was hemorrhaging money, not losing a little here and there, hemorrhaging it. In 2023, GM lost an estimated $1.7 billion on EVs. In 2024, that number jumped to roughly $2.5 billion on about 189,000 vehicles. And that was the good year. Then 2025 happened. In October 2025, GM pre-announced a $1.6 billion charge. $1.2 billion was non-cash impairments tied to converting the Orion assembly plant from electric trucks back to gas-powered vehicles. Let that math hit you for a second. GM spent $4 billion converting a factory to build electric trucks, then spent more money to convert it back. They also wrote down battery module capacity, killed their hydrogen fuel cell program, and took losses on emissions credits they could no longer sell. Then came the $400 million in cash charges for canceling supplier contracts. But more on the Q4 numbers in a minute, because what happened in the fourth quarter makes October look like a rounding error.
But first, you need to see the products that got Barra into this mess. Because the $7.6 billion write-off did not come from nowhere. It came from a lineup of electric vehicles that ranged from embarrassing to catastrophic. Start with the Chevrolet Blazer EV. GM launched it in the summer of 2023 as their mainstream electric SUV. Within months, it was a disaster. On December 22, 2023, GM issued an 11-week stop sale. Not a recall notice you can ignore, a full stop sale. Dealers could not sell them. Customers could not buy them. The software was so broken that infotainment screens went dark and DC fast charging flat out did not work. GM delivered just 482 Blazer EVs for all of 2023. By Q1 2026, that number was down to 1,077 units. Imagine being the engineer who worked on that car for years and watching it sit on the lot because nobody at corporate could get the software right. Then there is the GMC Hummer EV, a 9,000-pound electric truck that costs over $100,000 and gets roughly 3 miles per kilowatt hour. Dealers were reporting profit margins of about $3,000 on a 6-figure vehicle.
That is a margin you would expect on a Honda Civic, not a $100,000 truck. Quarterly sales never cracked 5,500 units. It was a marketing stunt disguised as a product. The Chevrolet Bolt, which was actually selling well as an affordable EV, got killed at the end of 2023, so GM could retool the Orion plant for electric trucks. Trucks that never ended up being built there. So GM discontinued the one EV people actually wanted to buy in order to make room for EVs that nobody wanted. You cannot make this stuff up. And then there is BrightDrop, GM's electric delivery van. They launched it with huge fanfare, promising to revolutionize commercial fleets. By May 2025, the plant in Ingersoll, Ontario was sitting idle. On October 21, 2025, GM officially killed BrightDrop. The commercial EV market was, in GM's own words, much slower than expected. The $40,000 commercial EV tax credit had been eliminated, another billion-dollar bet that went nowhere. The only bright spot in the entire lineup has been the Chevrolet Equinox EV, which hit 25,000 units in Q3 2025. But one affordable crossover cannot bail out an entire electrification strategy that is bleeding money everywhere else. And even the Equinox is built in Mexico, which means it is sitting right in the crosshairs of the 25% tariff on imported vehicles. Now, here is where the story gets really expensive. Because EVs were not the only money pit Mary Barra was pouring cash into. In 2016, GM acquired a self-driving car startup called Cruise for $581 million. The vision was simple: autonomous robotaxis operating in major cities. GM was going to own the future of transportation. Barra's team projected Cruise could eventually generate $50 billion in annual revenue. $50 billion. That number got thrown around in investor presentations like it was a sure thing.
What actually happened was a decade-long cash bonfire. Cruise burned through more than $10 billion in cumulative operating losses against less than $500 million in revenue. Then, in October 2023, a Cruise vehicle in San Francisco struck a pedestrian and dragged her 20 feet. NHTSA hit Cruise with a $1.5 million fine. The founder and CEO, Kyle Vogt, resigned. An independent investigation found serious cultural and leadership failures inside the company. California pulled Cruise's permit to operate, and on December 10, 2024, Barra finally pulled the plug. GM would stop funding the robotaxi program entirely and fold whatever was left into its internal driver assistance division. That is $10 billion gone, not slowly over decades, gone in 8 years. And the $50 billion revenue projection quietly deleted from every investor deck. I honestly think if any normal person burned through $10 billion with nothing to show for it, they would not be allowed to manage a lemonade stand. But in corporate America, you get to keep your corner office and tell the press you have no regrets. And here is the part that should really scare you, because the losses are only half the story. What Barra did after the losses is the part that makes you question whether anyone at GM is reading the same numbers the rest of us are reading. While GM was writing off billions, the entire EV market was collapsing around them. The $7,500 federal EV tax credit, the one that had been propping up demand since 2023, expired on September 30, 2025. President Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act on July 4, 2025, killing the credit 8 years ahead of schedule. The $4,000 used EV credit died too, so did the $40,000 commercial EV credit that was keeping programs like BrightDrop alive. Buyers rushed in before the deadline. Q3 2025 hit record EV sales across the industry as people scrambled to lock in their $7,500. Then the floor dropped out. GM's Q4 2025 EV sales crashed 43% year-over-year to just 25,219 units. The Equinox EV went from 25,000 units in Q3 to just 5,111 in Q4. The Blazer EV dropped to 1,812. Q1 2026 fell another 19% to 25,851. Industry-wide, forecasters now expect EVs to account for just 6% of total US sales in 2026. That is down from 7.4% in 2025. For the first time in over a decade, the EV market is actually shrinking, not slowing down, shrinking. On top of the debt tax credit, Trump slapped a 25% tariff on imported vehicles. The Equinox EV and Blazer EV are built in Mexico. The math on those vehicles just got a lot uglier overnight. And with California's EV sales mandates revoked, the regulatory pressure that was forcing automakers to build these cars in the first place has completely disappeared. Think about that for a second. The tax incentives that made EVs affordable for buyers are gone. The regulations that forced automakers to build them are gone, and the tariffs just made the ones GM does build more expensive. The entire foundation that GM's EV business case was built on has been pulled out from underneath them. And here is the part that really tells you everything. Look at what every other major automaker did when they saw these same numbers.
Ford took a $19.5 billion write-down on its EV division in December 2025. They killed several planned EV programs, including the next-generation electric F-150 Lightning. They pushed EV profitability out to 2029. Ford CEO Jim Farley basically admitted the math does not work. Stellantis booked $26.5 billion in EV-related charges. Their new CEO, Antonio Filosa, officially abandoned the Dare Forward 2030 plan that called for 100% EV sales in Europe and 50% in the US. They sold their stake in a battery joint venture with LG. They are projecting a net loss of $19 to $21 billion for 2025. Honda canceled its entire EV lineup: the Zero Saloon, the Zero SUV, the Acura RSX. All dead. $15.7 billion in restructuring charges, their first operating loss since 1957. Every single one of these companies looked at the same collapsing market and decided to stop the bleeding. Ford pulled back, Stellantis pulled back, Honda pulled back. And GM? GM looked at $7.6 billion in losses, a dead robotaxi division, a shrinking market, dead tax credits, and 25% tariffs and said, "We are going harder." That is the moment this stops being a business story and becomes a story about one CEO who refuses to read the room. On January 12, 2026, Mary Barra stood in front of the Automotive Press Association at Hudson's in downtown Detroit and delivered what might be the most disconnected statement any auto executive has made in the last decade. She said she has no regrets about GM's EV investments. She called electrification GM's North Star. She said, and I am not making this up, that everything they knew at that point in time, they would have made the same decision. She even cited a statistic claiming that once someone buys an EV, they are 80% more likely to buy another one. Great, but 80% loyalty does not matter if nobody is buying the first one. 2 weeks later, on January 27th, GM reported Q4 earnings. The roughly $6 billion Q4 EV charge dropped. Combined with the Q3 charges, the $1.1 billion China joint venture restructuring, and the ongoing operational losses, 2025 was a bloodbath. Net income fell 55% to $2.7 billion. And Barra's response? A new next-generation EV platform launching in 2028 on the Cadillac Escalade IQ. New prismatic battery cells with LG Energy Solution that GM claims will cut costs by several $1,000s. A Level 3 autonomous driving system that lets you take your eyes off the road. More EVs, more investment, more bets on a market that is shrinking in real time. Look, I am not going to pretend I have an MBA or that I know how to run a Fortune 500 company. But I do know that when you lose nearly $8 billion on something, and every one of your competitors is running away from that same thing, and the government just pulled the subsidies that made it possible, and customers are buying 43% fewer of them, maybe the answer is not to do more of it. Call me crazy, but that feels like common sense. And the worst part is the pattern. Barra promised 1 million EVs by 2025. GM sold 169,000 in 2025. Not even close. Not even in the same zip code.
In July 2024, Barra went on CNBC and admitted the market is just not developing fast enough to hit that target. But she said it like it was the market's fault, not hers. She promised the Bolt replacement would come at an affordable price point after canceling the original. The $5 billion partnership with Honda to build a sub-$30,000 EV was killed in October 2023 because it would be difficult as a business. Honda's CEO told the press the program could not hit the target range or the target cost. So the one EV that might have actually been cheap enough for regular people to buy never got built. The Orion plant spent $4 billion converting to EV trucks and is now converting back. Cruise was going to generate $50 billion in revenue and generated almost nothing. She told investors in December 2023 that GM EVs would hit mid-single-digit margins in 2025 with help from the IRA tax credits. Those credits are now dead, and the margins never showed up. Every major EV commitment Barra has made has either been walked back, delayed, or canceled outright. And yet, after every single one of these failures, the message from the top has been the same. No regrets, stay the course. The destination has not changed. Meanwhile, the people who actually get hurt by these decisions are the ones who never get asked. The workers at the Orion assembly plant who were told their jobs were going electric and now are being told their jobs are going back. The BrightDrop employees in Ingersoll who watched their factory go idle and then got the phone call that the whole program was dead. The GM dealers sitting on lots full of Blazer EVs and Hummer EVs that customers are not walking in to buy. Those are real people with real mortgages and real families who are paying the price for bets they did not get to make. Wall Street does not seem to care. On the day GM reported that $7.6 billion write-off, the stock actually jumped 9% and hit $87.31, the highest price since the 2009 restructuring. Morgan Stanley upgraded GM to overweight with a $90 price target. The market basically said, "Thank you for admitting the EVs are not working, now please sell us more trucks." And honestly, that tells you everything. The stock did not go up because of the EV strategy. The stock went up in spite of it. GM reports Q2 2026 earnings in July, and the EV losses are not done. The company has already warned that additional charges will carry into 2026 as supplier contracts close out. Subscribe so you get those numbers before the spin starts.